When you own equity, you're afraid, and fear makes you work harder. So, I mean, it's at every layer. So, I used to have incentive when I worked at an academic site. And I'll give you an example. So, let's say in that world, if a patient complained to me, "Hey, Dr. Chan, I didn't like this about your clinic." Even though I had incentive, I didn't have an ability to really significantly make change in the institution. So I would say something along the lines of, "I'm so sorry that was your experience. I'm going to, take this feedback, send this feedback up the chain." And most of the time I felt like nothing would really happen. Versus when you own or co-own a clinic, when a patient complains about something, I jump on it. I say, "What was the issue? Who was the issue? I'm sorry you had that experience. I will change it."
How many independent fertility practices are there now? Thanks to support from Midcap Advisors, Inside Reproductive Health has done the work and compiled a list of over 450 fertility clinics across the USA, indicating if they're independently owned, part of a fertility network, if so which, or part of an academic system. Visit InsideReproductiveHealth.com. On the main navigation, you'll see Fertility Industry Reports. Click on that to find the United States Practice Ownership List, or wherever you got this episode from, we will link to it in the email, in the social posts, and in the episode notes.
How in the blue heck do 3 young female REIs compete against the private equity giants in this bidding war going on for fertility clinics to outdo them and acquire a fertility clinic of their own? Dr. Crystal Chan explains how. She explains how she found her 2 partners. She explains what decision-making authority academic REIs often lack and what particularly pushed her away from academics and into private practice. She shares her thoughts on female entrepreneurship, the disparity that she and her partners decided to tackle, and the challenges they faced in doing so. She talks about the private equity-owned market versus the independently owned market. She talks about their vision for increasing access to care. Hear what she has to say about remaining independently owned, and why it's so important that REIs own equity, and why owning equity is more effective than other types of incentives. I love it when audience members have hot takes and then become guests on the podcast. I hope that's you, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Crystal Chan.
Today's advertiser helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertiser. The advertiser does not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertiser.
Dr. Chan, Crystal, welcome to the Inside Reproductive Health podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite, Griffin. I'm a huge fan of your show. I listen to it on my drive to work every day. It gets me, inspired and ready to take on the day. So it's a real honor to be here, and I'm excited to hear my own voice, I guess, on my drive to work one day.
That is very kind of you. I appreciate when people in the audience become guests on the show. And we have a few mutual friends, Dr. Nat being one of them. But I don't know a lot about you, and I'm going to change that today. I know just a little bit about you, and that you are an anomaly in this millennial REI world of purchasing an existing fertility practice independently owned by physicians. There's very few that have done that in the US, and perhaps even fewer in Canada in recent years. And so I want to understand what happened even prior to asking why. So your practice is Markham Fertility Center, and for those that aren't familiar with Markham, that's I guess now you would call it a first ring suburb, since Toronto ate its suburbs 25 years ago. So Markham is like a very large first ring suburb of the 5th or 6th largest metro in the continent. And there was a practice there. You are now one of the owners. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that goes back to our origin story as the modern Markham Fertility Center, or MFC. So I personally started my career in academia. I was at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, in the core of Toronto, as a clinician investigator and an academic REI or RE. So that had been my dream, and I thought that I would live and die for that job. When I signed on as an academic RE, I never thought I would leave. All my mentors, who I love dearly, still work there, And I did my fellowships there and I stayed on for a job. So in total, I was probably at this academic facility for 6 to 7 years as an attending, 8 to 9 years if you include fellowship. So about 5 years in, I started to feel this itch, the 5-year itch, which is to leave and go private. And I think it started with this very simple notion of wanting more control over myself and my environment. I mean, you hear that a lot from people that leave academia. There were a few triggers. Well, firstly is the idea of being your own boss. So I think a lot of us naively go into medicine thinking, this is the job you do to be your own boss. And the greatest irony is that in academia, you discover very quickly that not only are you not your own boss, you actually don't only have one boss, you have many bosses and lots of bosses that you are accountable to, for research, for committees, teaching. And I feel guilty a bit saying this because these mentors and the bosses I had, I still very much, respect them and were mentored by them. But it's always this feeling of like publish or perish, do the teaching, do the committees, and feeling of you're never doing enough. And so it got a little bit tiring, and some of these tasks weren't bringing me that much joy. So that there was this desire to go be my own boss. The second thing was COVID. I think that COVID illuminated a lot of cracks in the system, and COVID coincided with the entry of PE into the fertility space in Canada. So COVID sort of made me realize just how little control I had over my work environment. And I'll give you an example. So I was the lead physician at a satellite clinic of this academic practice. And I guess the hospital wanted to close down my site because of COVID to save money. And fine. I mean, that's obviously a very smart business decision. And now as a business owner, I probably have to do the same thing. But I wasn't consulted as the person that was the lead physician at the site, as the person that kind of built the site and the referral base and all that.
So just timing wise, was this like at the height of this is in March of 2020, or is this more like after 2021, something like that?
This was the summer of 2020.
Okay.
So, I only kind of knew the site was done when they had packed up all my stuff in a box and say, hey, someone closed your office. So these
And this was not a hiatus because of the pandemic. It was the office is closed.
It was after the hiatus because of COVID and an intentional decision of the business to close the office without consulting.
But the idea was that it was not coming back online.
It was not coming back online. It hasn't come back online. It wasn't a viable business thing for them. And that's fine. So I guess, I was just looking for an alternative. Where could I care for my patients, do the research at the pace I wanted to, and have some say over operations? And I wouldn't leave that cushy, secure, stable academic job in my mind to be an associate at a private clinic. Particularly, I was a little afraid of the reputation of PE-backed clinics or networks, as I was just, I think physicians are raised to be wary of big corporations and the prioritization of profits over patients. There was this fear of mine that if I joined as an associate somewhere PE-backed, that I would be forced to see a certain number of patients at a certain frequency, that I would be incentivized or asked to, convert a certain number of patients to IVF. And that in my mind, that environment would be worse than academia. So I knew my next step kind of had to be MD owner of either a de novo clinic or what I like to call a turnkey clinic, which is what we ended up. And I knew from the type of person I am, I'm social and gregarious, I'm a bit of a socialist, that I couldn't be a sole proprietor. It's just not my style. I like to have friends and I like to trauma bond with friends. So I knew that I had to, go into a group partnership with other doctors and I had to find them. So, Eduardo Harrington, who I'm sure we both adore, he did the podcast with you, many podcasts, and he talked about when you're looking for a practice, what to pick. And he said, try to pick a rocket ship going to the moon, not like the sinking Titanic, right? So you want a proven business, good track record with projections of success in this crazy marketplace. So then I had to find the perfect partners, entrepreneurial REs to partner with me, find a turnkey rocket ship clinic. So easy, right? Really easy. And the other problem, as you know from, in the province of Ontario, there's a publicly funded IVF system and only existing brick and mortar clinics get funding. If you build a de novo clinic, you can't get access to that funding as it currently stands. So we also have to
add that to item 93 of how confusing the Ontario funding for IVF is.
Exactly. So had to find this perfect storm. And I think what I realized in life is it's better to be lucky than good. And quite literally at that point, Markham Fertility and my amazing partners, Dr. Mavis Garcia and Dr. Marta Wise, like fell into my lap. So the story was that MFC had been around for about 30 years. It, by volume, it's in the country, it's probably the 10th or 11th biggest IVF clinic. It's the northernmost IVF clinic and lab in the Greater Toronto area, in this metropolitan Toronto area. So it has access to all the north smaller towns. It was started by Dr. Mike Vero, who was this larger-than-life character who had a waiting list of a year, like one of these guys with like the guru status, right? Cult following of nations. He started MFC as a sole proprietor and hired Dr. Garcia, Dr. Wise as his associates. Check them out on their podcast called My Fertility Podcast. So these women are influencers, they're superstars, and just incredible physicians. Lucky to work with them.
And so they were already working with Dr. Vero.
Exactly. 5 years ago, they were trucking along, amazing business. And they thought naively before PE came in that one day if they worked hard enough, Dr. Vero would be like, hey guys, I'm retiring. Here's the business. Peace out. You know, I bestow you my business. But of course that didn't happen. And what actually happened was his desire to retire that came around COVID time intersected with a feeding frenzy of PE acquiring Canadian clinics. He got multiple PE-backed offers for MFC, and he was ready to retire. So at the end of 2020, he came to Dr. Garcia and said, look, I'm sorry. I know you wanted to take over. I know you were preparing to take over. She was assistant medical director for years. But look, I got these insane PE-backed offers, and I'm sorry. So at that point, Dr. Garcia, the phenomenal woman that she is, said, just give me one chance. And he's like, no way. Associates can't buy clinics at this level. This is a different playing field. But he conceded and he let her they told Dr. Wise, the junior associate.
So was Dr. Garcia a partner at that time? Did she own equity in the practice? Neither Dr. Garcia nor Dr. Wise owned any equity. Dr. Vero was 100% equity partner.
There were naysayers. So at the time, we were already aware of the multipliers that were involved, and no independent physicians in Canada, to my knowledge, had ever acquired a clinic at those levels. And we had been brainwashed with that notion that it's impossible. PE has too much money and leverage. But they knew from the books that it was actually not that big a risk. The numbers made sense. The people made sense. The clinic made sense. The goodwill, the referral base, the public funding. And they approached me. This is the good thing about having friends. So we were friends. So they approached me. I was not quite mid-career, but, kind of in that cusp of mid-career with a good referral base myself and a good reputation. And the three of us women are immigrants or first-generation immigrants with just so much grit and like sheer will that we just knew we could do it. We were a bit scared, but we knew we could do it. So we bet on ourselves and found a bank that liked the numbers and shared the vision, and we acquired the business, and no looking back. We just bet on ourselves and guaranteed the business to ourselves. And now this is, here we are with the new MFC.
So are the investment banks the same as the commercial banks in Canada for this purpose? Like you've got RBC, you've got Bank of Montreal, you got Scotiabank. There's only a handful of options on the commercial side in Canada, generally speaking, isn't it? And so is there also only a handful of options for, did you go through a commercial bank or did you go through an investment bank?
We went through one of the big four commercial banks, amazing, Scotiabank. We have a banker there that is like a friend, an ally, and he and his team really saw the vision. There were other commercial banks that declined, but we found a banker and a bank that really saw the potential.
So I can't help but think about this, Chris. When you mentioned this, right going into the interview, you mentioned that you all had found a way to compete with the multiples that other clinics were, that other firms were paying for clinics. And I thought, well, why would a multiple be so high for a single doc practice? And it's almost like Dr. Vero couldn't have gotten a multiple like that without having Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss work for him. So it's almost like, you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like in that part, it worked against you a little bit, didn't it?
Well, so I obviously can't disclose the amount that we acquired the clinic for, but as well as I do, it's not always about dollars and cents when you negotiate a deal. It's also what value you bring. We gave Dr. Vero huge value. You know, he would have to pay his dues for 3 to 5 years if he had sold to a PE-backed network or a firm. He didn't have to do that with us. He worked 3 to 6 months. We were confident we had volumes and the trajectory that we would be okay once he left. I remember his last day, he wore basketball shorts, and then he just pieced out. And it was a nice transition for him, I think. I mean, there's always, when you're negotiating such a big deal, there's tension. But I do think, I mean, I guess you could interview him, but I think it gave him that freedom. We also took care of his staff, his legacy, his patients. He really cared about his patients and his staff. And that's the big thing. I think a lot of people that sell to PE, they worry more about the succession, you know. So we gave him, other than just dollars and cents. And, you know, I'm not going to get into details of the multiplier and this and that, but we gave him other type of value. And I would say on an emotional level, Griffin, that's a good interpretation. But I would say a good business is a good business. And the numbers make sense, and they still make sense. And we're doing better than any projections. And so to have the opportunity to have an established clinic, established personnel, very minimal turnover, public funding, reputation, the geographic positioning in this metropolitan area, all those things to me have been more than worth the price. It's the best decision I've ever made.
I do not know Dr. Vero. I know of him, and I knew of him. And I believe when I first became acquainted with him, he was a solo practitioner. Was he a solo practitioner prior to Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, lone wolf kind of guy. You know, he's from the generation of sole proprietors. I think I'm not sure if that era is gone, but yes, he was a sole proprietor from beginning to end. He had several iterations of MFC, starting at a smaller location first, smaller lab, and then finally, you know, expanded to this 10,000 square feet or whatever it is that we have in the medical building now. So, but he was always on his own with associates, with no equity.
Okay. Was Dr. Garcia the first associate, or he had other associate REIs over the years?
He had others, but she was probably the most tenacious, loyal, present, and highest volume partner. And he was, I guess, the only one he had ever designated as assistant medical director.
And Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss were the only associates at the time when he was retiring and selling?
Correct. Oh, I should add, there were also 2 affiliates. Affiliates defined as people that had their independent practices and then plugged into the lab for their IVF. And those relationships still exist.
But it was you that approached Dr. Weiss and Dr. Garcia, not the other way around originally. They weren't looking, hey, let's get one more person to buy this with us. You were looking around at what might be
no. It was a perfect alignment. They were looking in a hurry, and I was open to the possibilities.
You may have answered this, but how were you just always in these sort of conversations together? But how did you align so quickly? How did you come to find each other?
Dr. Wise was my favorite fellow ever. She did fellowship at my academic site. She was just a superstar fellow, and she went off to MFC. But the funny thing is, I encouraged her to go there. I said, hey, there's this clinic in the north. It's like a diamond in the rough. Go there. So she kind of, we were friends. We were kind of staff and fellow, but then we were actually friends. And then Dr. Garcia's husband is friends with my ex-husband. So it's a very small world. So there's a little bit of, pre-connection before all this happened. So we're all friends.
So then you shop around at banks, you find one that is a good partner, you agree to a deal that worked for Dr. Vero. And then you mentioned succession was a handful of months, and he went out in basketball shorts. But tell me, how did succession go? Like from when the deal was inked to when Dr. Vero's out shooting hoops, like what happened in between then?
There's a funny story right after acquisition. So, 30 minutes into acquiring the business, the ink wasn't even dry. We get a phone call from a very reputable, very senior RE that works, with a big PE-backed network. And he called us to congratulate us And then he followed by saying, "Are you interested in partnership?" So we were like 30 minutes into being, business owners, and the first informal offer to merge or to be acquired came in. So we tried to, kind of put the blinders on to all that was happening with PE consolidation around us. And the first 100 days of acquiring the practice was to sort of understand the business and to amalgamate the business. So actually the original organizational structure of MFC was very archaic. How it was is that the MFC was actually Dr. Vero's practice, plus the lab, plus biochemistry. And then the other associate doctors ran their own practice. They ran their own HR, they ran their own management, their own equipment, things like that. And then they would plug into the lab or pay MFC for the use of the IVF lab. So that obviously was not a modern way or efficient way of functioning. So the first 100 days was nose to the grindstone, just transforming what we call old co MFC to the new co, amalgamating everything under the same umbrella, everything under the same leadership, HR management, all of that. And it sounds like not a big deal, but it is a big deal. You have to renegotiate contracts basically as a new employer for, half the staff. You have to do this all while being very cognizant of people's feelings. They are grieving the loss of Dr. Vero. Some of them went back with him for 20 years, right? So there's this transition and nobody likes change. We don't like change, or the staff don't like change. So that was hard. Lots of tears, lots of stress in that transition, but we did it.
So tell me more about the details of this transition. This is like switching payroll companies or HR software or your EMR or what else?
Switching payrolls and switching your boss, your direct report. So for example, a nurse that reported only to Dr. Garcia on Monday, now on Tuesday is an employee of MFC and has to report to the HR department of MFC. So whatever you're used to, your culture, your, how you get things done in your little sphere changes when you start reporting to somebody else. So yes, payroll had to change. Direct reports had to change. We had to redo the whole organizational chart of the clinic.
I'm talking with Dr. Chan about keeping independent practices thriving in this era of consolidation, but how do you know which fertility centers are still independently owned? Many of you have asked for a comprehensive list of fertility practices that shows who owns each of them. We heard you. Thanks to support from Midcap Advisors, Inside Reproductive Health has done the work and compiled a list of over 450 fertility clinics across the USA, indicating if they're independently owned, part of a fertility network, or part of an academic or hospital system. If you're an independent practice owner that wants to find your people, if you're an industry side person that wants to map your customers, if you're a fertility network that wants to check your own list, you can download this list for free. Just head to InsideReproductiveHealth.com. On the main navigation, you'll see Fertility Industry Reports. Click on that to find the fertility practice ownership list. And voila, fill out a short form, no credit card info, nothing like that. It's free. Get instant access.
And so what did you find to be the biggest challenge in doing that?
People get comfortable in their roles, and people get comfortable in what they can control and who they can control and what they can't control. So there were a lot of growing pains, and we spent a lot of time talking to the staff, getting their feedback. The feedback almost always was, you guys are changing things too quickly. It was fine. Why are we doing it differently? And so just to sort of draw people back to what the vision is. And we did a lot of visioning and mission statement development with the staff. We actually had a retreat about that to sort of say, look, guys, we have old co out of necessity from a business standpoint. We have to transition to new co. Let's not make this about, this nurse versus that nurse, or, don't be too granular. Let's talk about what the vision is for new co. What is the vision as a clinic? And, we can talk about what we came up with as a vision, but let's focus on the vision, and everything that we do is to get us closer to that goal, that mission.
And so you are getting people to buy into the vision. Remind me of when the deal closed. Was that 21?
Yeah, mid-2021, summer of 2021.
We're now recording in May of 24. And so 3 years. So in the beginning, you had that sort of, a lot changing quickly. 3 years later, is it still a lot changing quickly?
I think as a group of partners, we're always looking for what's next. We're very hardworking. We all strive to be the best. We really want to excel in this marketplace. So yes, we're always looking for what's the next opportunity, what's the next project, how can we do better for our business, how can we do better for our patients, our staff. But I would say the frenzy has settled down. I think that first 100 days was really the most difficult. And now it's kind of fun, Griffin. So I think when we first started, it felt a bit like we were David against Goliath, Goliath being the PE back first. As confident as we are, there was a little bit of fear. Can we compete, in the marketplace? So in the past 3 years, not only have we survived the loss of the headliner, Dr. Vero, we have replaced him and we've grown 20% in volumes and referrals and in our socials and our reputation, our staff satisfaction score, our patient satisfaction scores. So we have really done really quite well in overcoming these challenges. So now that fear has been replaced by excitement about what's next and sort of this feeling that as an independent, privately owned, doctor-owned clinic, we have more agility. And now I think of our independence and our we don't have to report to investors. We just report to ourselves, our patients, and our staff. I think of it as a competitive advantage because it lets us be nimble and agile and sort of, make a quick decision about what our next project is and just go for it.
Are you hiring doctors?
Yep. So we were able to get one more associate, the amazing Dr. Kanji. That was a year and a half ago. And we are getting another one joining this summer. And yeah, we're looking for more. We definitely have the referrals to accommodate at this point, probably 5 or 6 REs.
Do you have a partnership track for the new docs coming in?
Yeah, so that's something we are developing. I will say that that's very, very early stages, but I do think, we've seen that when doctors have skin in the game, they perform better. I think that no matter what, incentive plans don't work as well as actual true equity ownership. So that's something that we're looking into. And we just really settled on a very, very strong leadership team. We have a gentleman named Mark Evans. He's our managing director. And we have a clinical director named Allison Gilmore. Combined, the two of them have run 4 Canadian fertility clinics, essentially, with about 40 years of combined experience. So with this current leadership, we're perfectly poised to sort of think about recruitment and how we secure that next generation of doctors, and partnership track and, partnership modeling is something we're looking into, but it's not refined yet.
I think Mark and I correspond on LinkedIn sometimes, and I think it was him that I found out that Dr. Vero had retired and that you all had come. I think even before Dan had mentioned it to me. And so something you said that incentives don't work as well as actually owning equity. Why is that the case?
When you own equity, you're afraid, and fear makes you work harder. So, it's at every layer. So I used to have incentive when I worked at an academic site. I'll give you an example. So let's say in that world, if a patient complained to me, "Hey, Dr. Chan, I didn't like this about your clinic." Even though I had incentive, I didn't have an ability to really significantly make change in the institution. So I would say something along the lines of, "I'm so sorry that was your experience. I'm going to, take this feedback, send this feedback up the chain." And most of the time I felt like nothing would really happen, to be honest. Versus when you own or co-own a clinic, when a patient complains about something, I jump on it. I say, "What was the issue? Who was the issue? I'm sorry you had that experience. I will change it." So so in my previous life, I had incentive, but it wasn't my mission to make the clinic the best possible place it could be for patients. In this life now, with equity and skin in the game, I feel like MFC is my baby. I can say from my partners, MFC is also their baby. We share this baby, and we want the baby to be the best baby it can possibly be. And every single piece of staff feedback, patient feedback resounds with us, and we do want to make a difference for it. So, I think that's kind of the difference. And I'm not saying that incentivize associate doctors not work hard. They do. They work hard for themselves, their patients, their families, but it's just different. We work hard not only for those entities, but also to build up MFC to make it the best it can be.
Think of how cool of a T-shirt that would be, Crystal. Equity equals fear. I think, I don't know if the doctor community would buy it so much, but the entrepreneurial community, they would be eating that up. Equity equals fear. I can just see like Valuetainment making those types of T-shirts. But and you're right, it does. So I want to talk about the percentage of equity and the percentage of fear, because I think that a lot of private equity-backed groups would say that is correct. Equity does equal fear. And so if you own less equity, you have less fear. You get that there's some sort of, maybe there's a J-curve where there's a benefit to having a certain amount of equity and the right amount of fear, but after that, it's all stress. And so I'm interested in how you would respond to that, but I'm also interested in, I've thought about like, well, how much equity does someone have to have the appropriate amount of fear? And what we're really saying with that is responsibility, that they actually take that sort of ownership. Would they do it at 1%? Would they do it at 5%? Like, does it have to be 20 or greater? Talk about that percentage of equity and fear.
Okay, so I think there is a benefit that the three partners here are equal partners. So I'm not sure if it's an exact percentage or just a feeling that you have an equal skin in the game and your friend and your sister is depending on you and you're depending on her and vice versa. So there's this real, again, here's the socialist in me, this equal partnership thing does breed that. So I really don't know if it's a numerical percentage. I think 100% is too much. I'm not worthy, to all those sole proprietors of the past. I can only imagine. Although back then it probably wasn't as competitive, but just to have that 100% of responsibility in yourself, that's a lot. So I think that's too much for a lot of modern REs. I don't know anyone who really like gets out of bed wanting to be like the 100% boss of a fertility clinic anymore, So I think equal partnership with, I don't think it's like 2 partners, 3 partners, 4 partners, 5 partners makes much of a difference. But I think that's that sense that you're in the game, you're playing as a team. It's like, I like to give this analogy that we're like a Super Bowl team, like the Kansas City Chiefs, like Dr. Garcia is the quarterback, I'm like the tight end. And because we're sharing and we're in this team together and we have the same vision to make it, to make it to the end, to get to the goal, she knows when she throws that ball, I'm going to be in the end zone and I'm going to catch that ball. So I think that the socialist in me likes to say that maybe it's not so much the percentage, but the spirit of the partnership.
That analogy hurts as a Bills fan. You're from Toronto, Crystal. Toronto's supposed to back Buffalo. It dug a little bit deep, but unfortunately, if you had used the Bills in that analogy, the analogy wouldn't work as well. I'm sorry to say. When you were musing on the areas for opportunity, the areas for growth, and you're reflecting on what are the biggest opportunities for the future, what answers did you come up with in those reflections? What are the biggest opportunities in the coming year or so?
It's very timely that you asked me this question. So I think like never before, growth is on the agenda, on the minds of, all fertility clinics at this point. We know it's a growing industry. We know that in North America, we're probably only 1% of people that need IVF are actually accessing IVF. So we know there's a lot of opportunities for growth and also, advocacy for patients and access. So one thing that we really are working on or struggling with as independent owners right now is how do we grow and whether or not we build a new clinic and lab at a different in a different town, a different city. Do we grow by growing the capacity of our headquarters, or do we grow by literally planting a flag in a different city or township and building a new IVF lab there? If you look at what the private equity-backed clinics are doing, a lot of them, the de novo clinics, as well as established clinics, are doing that. And it's very interesting, and I think it comes from the fact that...
Moving to a new city, you're saying moving to an entirely different province or state?
Or city to build a different lab, just to spread their footprint. So if you look at PE, it's a short-term agenda. They're buying revenue streams, they're buying profit streams, and they're hoping to exit in a certain amount of time, pretty short-term, usually about 7 years, and with a margin to show for. So I think there's much more of a mandate to increase the footprint and build clinics and amalgamate sites and just have more IVF labs, more IVF sites. But if you look at independent proprietors, the interesting thing is the biggest clinic in the GTA, the highest volume clinic in the GTA, owned by a single proprietor, only has one lab, one site. So the question is, if you don't have to show the investors what you did, is it better to build out your one site and do 2,000 IVF cycles there? Or is it better to build another site and do 1,000 and 1,000? The second you leave your headquarters and you build another IVF lab, you have personnel to worry about, you have staffing, you have HR, you have risk, you have all these operational costs that you have to multiply and compound. So again, when PE is coming in and they're endowing X number of millions of dollars to a group of physicians, they have to do something with that money. They have to sort of, have something to show for, investments to show for. But as an independent clinic, we're not sure that's the right move. What we know we want to do is improve access to people in the north of Ontario. It is frankly unfair. So there are about 16, 17 clinics in the Greater Toronto area and around, and there's nothing up north. And that's not fair. And our patients from the north have to drive 9 hours to get here. It's absurd. So this is definitely passion over profit here as we figure out how to organically, sustainably expand and address that volume in the north, north of Ontario that needs to be serviced on reserve, off reserve, just, North Ontario.
And reserve refers to First Nations people. What here would either be called Native American reservations or Native American territory, and so which there are multiple of in North Ontario and just very rural areas. And I don't even know if rural is that's the right
word. That is the right word. Yeah.
Well, but it's like farmland even disappears. 100 miles north of Toronto. You know what I mean? It's towns that are quite isolated even from each other, and they're very low population centers. So you're thinking of putting an IVF lab up there?
No, that's definitely not what we're thinking, but just improving access and hubs to people in the north. It's a necessity. It's a necessity at this point. And if you look at where the PE-backed clinics are going, they're just going more core, more central, more business metropolitan areas, right? Because that's where the volumes are. So they're not going to attend to sparsely populated areas. So again, this is where it's nice to be an independent. Yes, you have to make smart business decisions, but it is also, you want to be a good doctor and a good person first, and this gives us the opportunity to do that. Where we're situated, our geography, it all works.
Are there technologies or other kind of partners that would help you do that, like expand that type of access in North Ontario in a way that wouldn't have been possible 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. Virtual clinics, virtual platforms, EMRs, apps, and, as people develop whole ultrasound wands and things like that. I think the tough part is blood drawing, phlebotomy services. But if you can figure out how to sort of scale that up, that would be great. And even before technology catches up, you can find partner clinics in the north. There are a lot of specialists in family medicine in the north that can help out with that. So it's just about having the desire to make it happen. And this is a big, big, big project for Mark Evans. This is his true baby, and his passion is to advocate for patients in rural areas to get access.
Are there any of those technologies, apps that you mentioned that you particularly like any companies or models that you feel strongly about?
We're just really in kind of discovery phase with them. So I really can't speak to any specific app that we're, looking at right now.
There was a doctor in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. I believe he has since retired, but he used to see patients in the Dakotas and really rural areas, and he had his own plane and he would fly to them. You see any of you getting your pilot's license?
I think, again, we're always looking for the next challenge. I'm not sure I want to be in like a doctor killer plane, but
they scare the hell out of me.
Yeah, I do have a little bit of like a free spirit where I think one day when MFC is like running and doesn't need me here all the time, I see not only myself, but Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiser, I can see us doing a little bit of medical missions and things like that and, doing something a little bit outside the box.
As larger networks and health systems continue to acquire fertility clinics, how many Dr. Crystal Chans are there on the U.S. side of the border? I don't have to guess. I know. I have a list, and I'm willing to let you have that list for $1 million. But because of Midcap Advisors, I'm willing to let you have that list for free. We've put together a comprehensive list of over 450 fertility practices across the United States, showing exactly who owns them. We think it's every fertility practice. We've indicated if they're independent, if they're owned by a network, by which one, or if they're academic or health system. Go to InsideReproductiveHealth.com, find the industry report section, and then find the fertility practice ownership list. You've been asking for this list for a long time. It's been updated as of October 2024, so don't wait. Grab it now. Go to InsideReproductiveHealth.com, and we'll also link it wherever you may have found this podcast in social posts, in the email, and in the episode notes so that it goes directly to that link.
With regard to staying independent, is that something that is part of the mission? So on day one, you got a call. You at least got a tire kick and call, and who knows, it could have been far more serious than that. And I imagine you've gotten plenty since, and you will get plenty more. How important is it to stay independent? How open to it? How open to merging or being acquired are you?
So we're very young. We're having a lot of fun. I always say to my partners, when this stops being fun, you let me know. Maybe we'll get out. But we're still having so much fun. And I cannot envision a time at this moment where we will stop doing this or stop functioning as independents. That being said, we have to look around us. So if you don't mind, I'll talk about the Canadian landscape.
Yeah, please.
So I think of Canada as a microcosm of the U.S. Is about the industry is probably 15% of what it is in the U.S. But the interesting thing about being a microcosm of the U.S. is that when change happens, you feel it sooner because it's smaller. It's a smaller swimming pool. So there are about 40 IVF clinics in Canada, and 5 to 10 years ago, the landscape was totally different. Out of those 40, about 7 were hospital-based academic centers, and now there's like two or three academic centers. Back 5 to 10 years ago, most of the clinics were independent physician-owned, and in the last 5 years, it's completely inverted. So Mark and I looked at the data, what we tried to sort of pull from the internet, talking to people, but by our calculation, by clinic, about 60% of Canadian fertility clinics are PE-backed and controlled, and the minority, 40%, are now independent or public or hospital-based. So that's by clinic. But if you do the calculation by number of REs that work at the clinics, actually 70% of the Canadian REs work in a PE-backed clinic or network. And where's that private capital coming from? It's both domestic and international. So 80% Canadian investors and, about 20% international. So this consolidation has been happening, fast and furious around us. So we're not immune to it, Griffin. Like I said, that was just one offer. We've probably been approached like 4 or 5 times in the past 3 years. So why is this happening? I think, I'm sure you've talked about this with a lot of guests. It's that entrance of PE into the market, recognizing the revenue streams that we have. And then number 2 is the original clinic proprietors reaching retirement age and wanting to sell. What is interesting is that you're seeing, and this, we're seeing our friends who are in their early 50s, some people who traditionally would be too young to sell or contemplate retirement. Some of these younger mid-career doctors are also selling. And I think, that why is that? I can speculate because I think they know that they have to put 5 years in, after they quote unquote sell, and they want a head start maybe on their retirement. And I think that, that's a trend that we're seeing. So when the networks or the private equity base, this is not to vilify PE at all, but when they come, I think there's a little bit of gaslighting that says, hey, this is a competitive market. You might want to work with us because you might need our HR to survive. And, our recruiting abilities, and maybe we can help you, right? So what I'm seeing is not a lot of Canadian doctors are actually falling for that. I'm not sure in the States that they are. So in Canada, the main entry points of PE seem to be, number one, helping doctors start a de novo clinic while retaining control, or number two, buying from retiring doctors or young-ish retiring doctors. We're not seeing a lot of Canadian fertility clinic owners at my age saying, oh, you're right, I need you. I don't know how to run my own business. Please help me. Here's some of my equity. I don't think we've seen any sales like that. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe one or two. But I think that's kind of the polarity of it. If you can't start your own de novo clinic, you might need PE investors to help you. Or if you're done or getting ready to be done, you need PE to help you get out. But we're in this kind of in the middle, having fun, running our clinic, proud of our baby, love our staff love us. Like there's no reason that I can foresee right now. That may change, but I don't see any reason right now for us to be consolidated. And I want to state very clearly, I am not here to vilify PE. Life is not black and white, or it exists in the grays. It's not like PE is bad and independents are good. In fact, there are many independent clinics that are really not good, and a lot of PE affiliated clinics that are fantastic. So this is not about that, but it's just right now we're having a good time being independent, and that's what we are for the foreseeable future.
In the U.S., it seems to me that your number two reason, in my view, is the number one reason that you've got retiring docs, and this is their way to cash out on what they've built. The problem with the view of the middle, in my view, is that you have so many, even in Canada, is that you have so many people that are in the middle, but they're with docs that were retiring. So you have plenty of middle partners, like 40-something-year-old partners that have plenty of fight left in them, but they have sold to private equity groups in Canada too, and lots of them. They were usually partners of older docs who were retiring. And we don't know for those 40-something-year-old docs, we don't know what will they take their earnout? They're probably, many of them are probably 2 years into a 3-year earnout or 3 years into a 5-year earnout. Will they take that, do that, go golf for a year if non-competes are enforceable in that way in both Canada and certain U.S. states, and then come back and start a competitor to their old practice? That could happen too.
I think that would be a great interview, Griffin, for the young retiree. I think that's a segment I don't think you've interviewed yet. I would be thrilled to hear from them. I think there's only a handful in Canada. I'm friends with some of them. There's a handful, and it'd be interesting to see what they see for their future.
I want to ask you what your view of the rising tide of female entrepreneurs, or of what we should think about when we think of women owning businesses. And I want to skew this with my own thought. And I want to hear your thoughts, but very often when I hear female entrepreneurship, it's related to venture capital. It's usually talking about going out and raising money and building large enterprises the VC way, as opposed to starting a small business and making a small profitable business. And so very often when I hear many people in women's health say that the venture capital is just not there for women's health in the way it is in other industries, and it's sexist, and it all very well may be. And those all very well may be valid arguments. They're not arguments that resonate with me on a personal level, because I started a business from nothing, and I didn't go the VC route, and I didn't ever try to raise money. And I want other people doing that. I want other people doing that in general, both men and women, because I think that's what is the best of capitalism, when multiple people own different ventures, that we have a really well-balanced economy and society when that happens. And there's no gatekeeper there. There's no person that says, yeah, I'll give you this amount of money or not. It's the marketplace. So you are maybe haven't had the gatekeeper of venture capital. I would say the banks are probably somewhat of a gatekeeper. And so what is your take on this, though? Because you also did not buy something, though, where you're trying to raise money and scale. Like, you bought a business that you're trying to make profitable yourself, and you're one of a few proprietors of it. How is your view on that landscape?
Those are interesting thoughts. But yeah, I would say when we presented to the banks, we had a little bit of that perceived kind of, I guess, going to use the word sexism. There was one banker I can remember that was a bit like, there, dearies, this seems like a big business for the three of you. And that bank decided to pass on us. But again, some banks have the vision. So on my comment on female entrepreneurship, yes, I would say, do you know what the greatest lie ever told was?
No.
Okay, I think the greatest lie ever told was that women don't make good business people, and that we can run businesses, and that women don't cut it as entrepreneurs as well as men do. So I guess I'm here. This is a very important mission of me being on the podcast, to say that I think that that's pure BS, and I think that's bias and implicit bias. And I would posit that many women are good business people. I mean, these are generalities, but women tend to be organized. Women tend to be multitaskers. Women tend to be calculative. I know that word has a bad connotation, but I wouldn't want to go into business with partners that are, can't calculate. So we tend to be calculative. We're nurturers. We nurture our staff, our patients, our clients, our business. And we know how to share and work together as a team. So if you find yourself lucky enough, as I am, to find a group of female partners that not only get along, but can mute their egos and delegate to each other and step up and step down relative to each other when, our strengths arise, that synergy can be amazing. And I think it's important to talk about female entrepreneurship because there's a lot of research right now about gender inequity. My colleague at University of Toronto, Andrea Simpson, she publishes a lot about gender pay gap in medicine. But in RE, it's not only a pay gap, it's a position gap. So in Canada, of the 40 clinics that we have, only 1 to 2 of the 40 are female physician independently owned. It depends how you define independently owned, but there's 1 to 2, like us. And there are 12 physician-owned male proprietorship clinics. But if you look at the graduating class of RE in the US and Canada, I bet you that's majority female. I guess I don't know that. I'm not a fellowship director, but I feel that it's majority female. So what is it? Why are female REs being trained, but not in the positions of academic chair or, business owner or co-owner or network, whatever owner? Is it lack of mentorship? Is it socialization? I don't think the answer is that women are bad at business. I don't buy that. So we are female physician led and owned. That is our brand. We are proud of it. We're out there internally, externally. Communications is very central to who we are. We're proud of it. We've leaned into it. We really do believe that female physicians know what patients go through, and that is our priority, to serve that our patient. And we want to inspire our staff. We always joke about it that since we took over, a lot of our staff have left us, not because they don't like working here, but to get, to advance their careers and education. I think because they see us in these positions of mentorship, and they go and which we foster that, love that. But we want to inspire young women in STEM to see that you can do what you dream of doing. We are a Latina woman, an East Asian woman, and a daughter of a Polish immigrants. The three of us, again, we are feisty, we are gritty, and there's a part of us that wants to prove something, that we can do it together as female entrepreneurs.
It was important to you to start with other women as an entrepreneurial cohort to select as your first partners. Will it remain that important to you as you bring on future partners?
It's a great question. So that was just more happenstance. It wasn't intentional, like, I want a team of females. It wasn't like that. It just happened that way. And I think that once that happened, that was who we are. But we're definitely not close to a male or other partner joining us. I definitely wouldn't say that. But what we're seeing is a reaction to this kind of how we present ourselves as, like, female physician led and owned. I'm not sure if it's like post Barbie movie or something, but there's a certain clientele of patients and a certain cohort of staff or employees that are attracted to us and drawn to us because we're seen as female entrepreneurs and like trailblazers ironically, is like 2024, but we're still seen as trailblazers in this industry by being female entrepreneurs. So there, out of like 10 consultations, there's going to be one patient that says, hey, I heard about you. I like how that you guys are running the business, not private equity. Like some people listen to Freakonomics. Like they know not everybody cares who owns their fertility clinic, but some people do. And some people come to us for that.
I think part of the reason why, just in general, you're seeing less younger docs own practices, but you mentioned, there's 11 or 12 male-owned independently owned practices. There's 1 to 2 female independently owned practices in Canada. Why do you feel that I'm with you that I don't think that there's any basis for suggesting that women make bad entrepreneurs, and to the contrary, plenty of evidence that they make great entrepreneurs. Why aren't more women choosing to do what you did? And or for those that are on the, maybe take it one step further, for those that are on the fence listening, what would you say that might nudge them?
So I think, I'm just going to say it. I think it's hard to be a mom and a business owner and a doctor and be present for everybody, your kids. I have 3 kids. So your kids, your staff, you just have to nurture too many people. So I can't imagine again being a mom and a doctor and a sole proprietor. So you kind of need to work in teams. You don't need to. I'm sure there are amazing female entrepreneurs who could build or buy a clinic on their own. But for us, I think we work better in a team, because if my kid gets sick, it's nice to know that Dr. Garcia can, be at my meeting or see my patient for me. So I think one of the tips is you can do it, because we did. It was scary. It was hard. But if you work hard enough, and everybody worked hard to get to be an RE, you can do it. But find partners. Find partners that you trust with your life. I'm going to get emotional now. Find partners that you love, that is like a sisterhood to you. And that's the only way I think you can be truly successful in this crazy consolidating environment we live in.
So I think there's a play, an endorsement for independently owned practice in there that maybe you didn't even, you live it, so you obviously realize it. But I too believe family first, career second. I know people want to say, you can do both. You can have it both. I'm saying for me, Griffin Jones, family first, career second. And then everything else to me is the thing that gets cut. My physical health would be third, and community. All those things are important. But I've there's no fantasy football in my life. There's no, there's very little like Netflix. It's like maybe like a Saturday movie with my wife, but I'm not like watching YouTube. Like I'm not scrolling on social media. Like all of that's the happy hours that people do. All of that is gone from my life, but it is family first. But I still do want to be financially free. I'm not trying to buy the biggest house in the community. I'm not trying to buy, an infinite fleet of classic cars. But I do, being financially free is important to me. So career is a second, but because I own my business and I don't have investors behind me, I go at my pace. And if it's like, you know what? I'm just not going to do this at this time because I really want to spend time with my kids. I really want to see my family. I want to be there with my grandparents when they're passing away, whatever it might be. I'm the one that decides, okay, that's just going to be a little less money that I make. Now, it goes back to the fear earlier. You have to get to a certain place where you're comfortable doing that. And if you got loans against you, and it is scary in the beginning, but once you get to a certain place, then it's just, you know what? I don't have to do this just to get another multiple. I can go at this place and I can prioritize in this way. So I think that's a plug for owning one's own business.
Right. And there will always be people like me. Someone called, I always quote this person. So an anonymous person said to me that you, Mavis, and Marna are dinosaurs. Nobody will ever do this again. Associates just want a little incentive plan, guaranteed income, and they're fine. They don't want to run a business. They don't want to take on the stress. They want to care for their families. But I don't think so. I think we are not the first or last to be like this, programmed this way. There will always be people that will take a chance on themselves. I think, we didn't really talk, I'm scientific director, but we didn't even talk about science or technology. But technology was supposed to improve access to IVF and drive down prices. Private equity was supposed to improve economies of scale, get volume discounts, and push down IVF price and improve access. That hasn't happened. We haven't seen PE or technology yet really move the needle on outcomes nor price. But eventually, hopefully, with AI coming in, IVF in a box, hopefully you'll decrease barriers to entry for independent people to start their own clinics. So I see, we've only been in this PE world for 5-10 years. In 10 years, everything we think we know now is going to be completely different. Some PE firms will be very successful and some won't. Some PE networks might have to sell out their clinics. Many, many crazy things will happen in the next decade. And so you're going to see probably a new wave of entrepreneurs coming in and doing it. And yeah, my take home point is find people that you can work with and that you trust. And there's never any, it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 between the three of us. We don't fight about that. We are in it together and we are a team and we're on a rocket ship to Mars, to quote Adorno.
I can't wait to have you back on to hear about where that rocket ship is flying and orbiting in some years' time, and to bring you back on to talk about why some of those technologies have not yet been able to make the field scale. But this has been such a great conversation. I'm glad that I've gotten the chance to know you more, and I look forward to having you back. Dr. Crystal Chan, thank you so much for coming on the Inside Reproductive Health podcast.
Thank you, Griffin.
How many independent fertility practices are there now? Thanks to support from Midcap Advisors, Inside Reproductive Health has done the work and compiled a list of over 450 fertility clinics across the USA, indicating if they're independently owned, part of a fertility network, if so which, or part of an academic system. Visit InsideReproductiveHealth.com. On the main navigation, you'll see Fertility Industry Reports. Click on that to find the United States Practice Ownership List, or wherever you got this episode from, we will link to it in the email, in the social posts, and in the episode notes.
Today's advertiser helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertiser. The advertiser does not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertiser. Thank you for listening to Inside Reproductive Health.